All right, good evening. Welcome to the Wake County Beekeepers Association February meeting. I'm Susan Benton. I'm a journeyman beekeeper. Tonight, I'm giving a presentation on how to read a frame. The pictures that you'll see are from cell phone photography. Most of them are taken in my apiary. There's a few that I got off of Facebook, and Gordon Goking sent me a couple pictures to use too. So let's go have a journey. Okay, I'm left-right challenged here. All right. It did not. It's perfect. All right, let's go to a beehive. If it's the middle of summertime, probably late summer afternoon, this is what you expect to see, and this is perfectly normal. It does not mean that your bees are going to swarm. It means that they've been out working, they've come home, it's hot, and they're sitting out on their porch just chilling. You can see from this picture that I use double deeps, or maybe not, but generally I do. Let's open the lid. When you take the top cover off and look in the beehive, this is what you hope to see. The top frames just covered with bees. This is a very happy sight. Okay, let's pretend like I've pulled out a frame from one of my deep boxes. Oh no, oh no. Oh my goodness. You ever feel like a disaster? I don't know what you do. You may have to advance my frames. All right. In the top band, for the part that looks like this, that is capped honey. The cells that look orange are capped brood. That means the queen laid an egg there, it turned into a larvae, and then the bees put a wax cover over it, and they are in the stage of, they'll turn into a pupa before they emerge as the adult bee. And on this side, where it looks like empty cells, to me, it looks like a little bit of nectar in there. So if I open a frame and it looks like this, I think, oh, this looks so good. Anybody have a comment? Yes.
What is it that makes the cappings on the brood such a different color from the cappings on the honey?
Stacy has asked, what makes the color of the cappings on the brood different from the other cappings? Or for example, on the wax looks very white. I don't really know. I think it has something to do with, it may have some pollen in that wax. And it may be that they've walked on it some. But I don't really know the answer to that question. Maybe Rick Bordeaux knows.
I think there's some, you notice they're very fibrous. Those cappings are very fibrous.
Yeah, Rick says cappings can be fibrous.
Yeah. So I think it may have to do with part of the larva when it spins the cocoon to go from larva to pupa. That cap is some of that spinning material.
Yeah, Rick says that when the larva spins a cocoon to go from larva to pupa, that some of that fibrous may be in that capping. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, did I have another question? All right, this is what I call a great brood pattern. You can see that most of this frame is filled with capped brood. How many cells are on a frame in general? Approximately 2,000. So if you can look at a side of the frame with like this, you can tell that I'm probably going to have about 2,000 new bees pretty soon when they emerge. Okay, next slide. Have you got that thing working yet? Okay, all right. What we see in this frame is capped brood and larva. I always say larva, and I have trouble spelling it, so that's why I put the singular and the plural of it. But your larva, you can see it down at the bottom here, the little white, looks like little white worms. There's one here, one here. Most of this is all capped. Okay, next slide, please. I recommend that you wire your frames. In fact, I brought one as an example of how I wire the frames. But in this picture that I got off of Facebook, you can see that the queen did not lay an egg in any of the cells where the wires are. And you can see the wires like here, going across. And if you would like, if you're in the room, I'm going to pass this around. If you don't want to touch it, just let your neighbor get it. But I brought this as an example of a frame that's wired. So you can see how I do it. It's got one nail, wires. This was the most interesting frame I could find. It has some wax foundation. It has some where the bees have drawn it out. It has a piece of comb that the bees did naturally. So you can see what the comb looks like in nature. You can see that it's two-sided with a sheet in the middle, but this was, the bees did that. It didn't have the foundation. And on the back side, you can see some insect damage. So I'm gonna pass that around.
So would you reuse this?
Yes,
Okay.
I just haven't needed it. Okay, next picture, please. Now, if you're getting a package of bees this year, you're a new beekeeper and you're going to put some frames in there with just wax on them, or you're going to put a strip of wax and let the bees build their own foundation, this is what the wax is going to look like that you see. It's going to be really white and it's just pretty. I just love that. You can see that mostly what I have is just drawn out wax, and I don't see any nectar in this. And you see a lot of bees working on that. Where does the wax come from? The younger bees have glands, and it comes out their abdomen. Thorax is your locomotion, and that it has glands. I think it's like six or eight little glands, and sometimes you can see the wax come out as little flakes. The younger bees produce that wax, and then they chew it with their mandibles to put it in the right shape to fill out this frame. Next slide, please. I give another picture. What do you see in this picture? If you pull this one out, would you say, oh no? You can see that this is an older frame. The wax is not really white, but it's been walked on for a while. I see some pollen in some of these cells. I see a few cells where they capped something and it didn't hatch. There's a little bit of honey up in the upper left and upper right corners. I would suppose that maybe, I use double deeps, and bees like to go up. Maybe the bees this was in the bottom box, and during the winter they moved up into the top box, and they did everything and hatched out, and they haven't started using that again. In the spring, which is coming up pretty soon, I will go out in my apiary and reverse my boxes. It's in your very first book is about how to do that. It works really good. So you might expect to see something like that in one of those boxes. Question? Okay, I have a box on the bottom. I have two deeps. Say A's on the bottom and B's on the top. I'll go and take the one that's on the top and put it on the bottom, and the one that was on the bottom, put it on the top. So because the bees like to go up. Then you've got your nest down in the bottom, and as they create their new brood, they'll go up. Right. Next slide, please. This one is really a close-up of the slide that we saw before. You can see some pollen here. And I don't know why these didn't hatch out, but I think the bees will come in and clean that out. Next slide, please. This is a slide from Gordon. It's made with a dark foundation. It's probably a plastic foundation. You'll notice on the edges there, the cells go all the way to the edge, where some of the other ones you see a gap there, because my bees tend to like to go from side to side. They make little passages and cut through. But on this, you can see some maybe nectar in here and maybe eggs. You know, I'm sitting like right here. I'm thinking that you can see eggs. I think the eggs are a little easier to see if you have the dark foundation, but I've used all wax in mine, so I don't have anything like that. Any questions? Do you see any honey? The band at the top, yeah. And it looks like on the side, well, it's hard to tell, but the dimensions of that. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, question, yes.
You said 2,000 cells per frame. Is that 1,000 each side or 2,000 each side?
2,000 each side, approximately on a deep frame. Just a rule of thumb. It'd be fun to count them. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is a picture I got from Facebook, because I love getting pictures from Facebook too, because I didn't have a picture of a queen cell. But imagine that we've taken the frame. Let me see if I can put it. See if I can do this without breaking. Okay. So I've taken the frame out and it's upside down and we're looking at the bottom of that frame, because normally those queen cells would be on the bottom. In the books, they describe the queen cells as looking like peanuts. Does it look like a peanut shell to you? Okay. So we can see a couple of those. Next to it, there's some cat brood here, but that brood extends up. It's not flat like we saw before. What kind of brood is that? It's drones. Drones are described as being bullet shaped. So that's some queen cells and some drone cells from Facebook. Next slide, please. This is an example of nectar in new wax. Isn't that pretty? Look how white that wax is. And look at that nectar. Doesn't that look like honey? The bees have put the nectar in that cell and they've started to cap it over on the left. You can see them working on that. They put those really pretty white caps on. They haven't walked on it too much to get it all dirty.
How long is the process where they fill the cell with honey until it's capped out? Like how long is that?
I don't know. I would think it depends on, the question is how long does it take them between the time they fill the cell with nectar and they cap it? Well, they fill the cells with nectar and then it has to ripen. Ripen means they evaporate water from it. And they want that nectar to have a water percent of less than 18.6%. And the bees know this. I don't know if they know the number, but they know when it works. And when it gets to where they want it right, they will put the wax cap on it. And I suppose it depends on the humidity and how fast they found nectar to fill up their cells to do that. That's a good question. All right, next frame, please. Okay, this is an example of some nectar in older wax. When you're first getting started, you don't have anything. Maybe you got your package of bees or your nook and you had to buy some new frames and get it started. But after you've been doing this for 2 or 3 years, you will have had a super and you will have extracted honey and you can save that wax in the frames till the next year. And then in the spring, you can put that on your beehive and it will be older wax. But the bees then, they don't have to generate new wax to store that. You have provided them a container to put your honey in and you'll start getting more honey. So, and I really admire the architecture. The cells are angled just a little bit so that the honey doesn't drip out. And the hexagon shape is a very optimal shape for storing in this space. And I think I read that a frame like the one I passed around, this will hold 6 to 8 pounds of honey. And the wax in that probably weighs less than an ounce. Very, very interesting. Okay, next frame, please. I just put another frame of stored nectar. But what was interesting to me about this frame is that you could see that these cells are drawn out some. These look a little flatter. You can see the foundation at the bottom here, the wire right there. It's not all flat. It's got some texture to it. And you've got, the cells are very white up here and they're darker here. Now, I don't know if that means that they got some brood up in there or if they've just walked on it more, why you have the discoloration. But as your wax ages, as bees have used it, it will get darker. Next cell, please. I mean, next frame. All right, here's a frame that shows the drone, the cap drone cells. They are said to look like bullets. You can see them along the edge here. In fact, this one's come out. Maybe on the bottom, I don't know if that's got a queen cell. There's bees on top of that. Right here, you would have some cap brood that will hatch into the female bees or the worker bees. And those cells that look like bullets or bumpy, they're a little bit bigger. They will be your drones or your male bees. Next slide, please. All right, I put this in as an example. If you don't use a queen excluder, you may get some brood up in your honey super, what you put on to get honey. Now, I don't generally use a queen excluder. I tried it out one time and the bees got stuck in it and it broke my heart that I killed a few bees. And so I just haven't been using one. I did try it though. I had a plastic one, the one that came with my beginner bee kit. So I got a little bit of drone up into a frame that I had planned to pull some honey. You can see the cells right here. So is that a problem? No, I just won't harvest any honey off of that. That will hatch out and the bees will clean it up and they'll probably put some honey in it later. Because I don't want to harvest any honey from a frame that's got brood in it. All right, and then I put on here, can you see a bee that has a varroa mite? How about that one right there? The lower right corner. I would say that is a varroa mite. Usually the varroa mites are on the underside of them, but occasionally you will see one on the top side. Not something you really want to see. Let's see, do we see any drones in this picture?
They thought you guys.
Yeah, like this one. Their eyes are so big, they look like they're grown together. So instead of looking like they have two eyes, but they do, it looks like one big eye. And then we have worker bees. No queen in this picture, but let's look at the next slide. Oh, I don't see a queen on this one either, but I do see some bee bread. Bees store pollen. It's their protein source. And they mix it and it becomes a fermented product known as bee bread. They feed it to their babies. If you observe your beehive right now, you're seeing the bees coming in with pollen. I go out and take a look every day. I've actually seen a few drones too. That's a really good sign. That means that my hive survived the winter. They've created some new bees because they kill off the drones in the fall. And so if you see drones now, they are new bees. Next slide, please. Oh, I knew we'd have a queen somewhere. I entered this picture in the state fair and I got a second place ribbon for it. The queen and her retinue. Retinue means your circle of advisors. And this is one way that I can spot a queen, because I'm not very good at it, but she is often surrounded by a circle of bees. So here's your queen right here. Any questions? How many queens are in a hive? Generally one. I mean, there's cases where some queens will coexist with other ones, but generally the answer is one. All right, next slide, please. This is an example of this is everybody beekeeper's dream. A beautiful frame with capped honey. It's white. It almost looks good enough to enter in the state fair. This is a picture that I took. I'm sure that I generally, because I follow Ben Crawley's example, I generally take out the second frame first. And I am sure that I pulled this frame out. I set it up on my box and I pulled out my cell phone and took a picture of this because I was so excited to see it. But I would say I'm going to pull frames to extract, and this has got capped honey. So under the white cappings is just pure honey. The color will depend on what kind of nectar source you had. You can see that this frame has very light. Okay, next frame, please. Now, after you have extracted your honey, you can take the caps off, you can put the frames out, the bees will come along and clean it up, and this is what it will look like. It's a little bit rough. It's a little rougher than what they did, but they have cleaned out all the honey from that, and you can put that frame in your freezer or store it somewhere and use it next year. Next slide, please. This is a picture of me. I got my husband to take the picture of me. We're going to look at some problems next, but I wanted you to see what I wear when I examine my hives. After 10 years, I finally got a bee suit. I got a like one of those jumpsuit things, but it's a bit hot. I generally just wear a long sleeve t-shirt and my white pants and my veil. And so there I am. Okay, now let's look at some ugly. The good, we've seen the good. Let's look at the bad and the ugly. Okay, this is a hive that got attacked by a wax moths. And when you can see I've opened up the top cover and there they are. This is their cocoons. I think there's a picture, there's one right there. You can see the larva right there. Oh, terrible. Wax moth damage. They put divots in your wood. Next slide, please. Yes. You probably should inspect your beehives at least once a month. You can, like I knew something was wrong with this one. I had not been seeing the bees fly in and out. This was a classic beekeeper error. I left too much space in this hive. When I took some honey off, I left the box, too many boxes on. It was too much space for my bees to protect. I won't do that again. Learn my lesson. Gordon?
Yeah, there's an online question from an earlier slide, if you don't mind. It says, Sir Patrick, because if I have multiple queen cells and a healthy queen, I would assume they're wanting to swarm. What's the best way to capture the queens in their cells for the colony, for the new colony?
Okay, the question from the online record. Can I save that for right after the presentation? Okay. We'll go to the next slide. We had a question about how long this takes to happen. Here's some more ugly. You can see the webs. You know you've got wax moths if you see the webs. I don't know how long this, I really don't know how long this takes. It didn't seem like it took too long, but I knew something was wrong, and then I opened it. It still had some bees in it, but they were losing. Another question. You could clean these frames up. You could salvage that wax if you wanted to and get rid of the what was left over. I did not choose to do that. I burned it. Oh, it makes a glorious fire. It's a glorious fire because it's got wax. Gordon?
There is a wax moth question online. Is there a way to treat for wax moths while the hives are active?
If you can catch your wax moths when they first get started, you can kind of pull things out and the bees can take care of it if your hive is strong. I've done that a bit. I don't know what you use to treat for wax moths. Generally, if you have a wax moth invasion, it is a symptom of a weak hive because if your hive is strong, they are able to defend that. This generally happens in the fall. How am I doing with time? Okay, next slide, please. This is a slide from Gordon. It shows varroa mites, and I haven't spoken about varroa very often, but this is a sticky board with varroa mites, and you can see them. You can see them on the computer. It looks better than on the screen, but all these are varroa mites. And the question was, can you count them? There was a lot. The sticky board has your squares so that you can count per inch. You can go to the next slide. I think it's my last one. So I leave you with an invitation to come to our monthly hands-on in the hives with Ben Crawling. You'll get a better view of looking at frames in person with real bees. Okay, Gordon, the question, would you ask the question again from the,
Sure. If I have multiple queen cells and a healthy queen, I would assume they're wanting to swarm. What is the best way to capture the queens in their cells for a new colony?
okay, if you have you open your hive and you see multiple queen cells, you have a healthy queen. The question is, what is the best way to capture that? If it's in the spring, I would recommend making a split. You can make your split. You can take out the frames that have the queen cells on, and you've got a choice. You can either take your queen out and move her to a different box and leave those queen cells in that box. Or you can take the frames out of the queen cell, put them in a smaller box with maybe a frame of honey and a frame of cat brood and a couple more frames. And you with the hope that those queen cells will hatch, the queen will go out on her mating flight, get mated, come back and start laying eggs. That's what I would do, make a split. I'm not saying it's going to prevent a swarm though, because I'm of the school that if your bees have decided to swarm, they're probably going to swarm. And my bees are swarm stock. They like to swarm. Right. Yes.
One more from the online crowd. These hands-on hives are also tested to be a certified beekeeper, correct? And how do I sign up, or do I just show up in person?
Yes, we will be at hands-on in the hive. We will be giving the certified test. Yeah, I assume that we'll have a sign-up sheet, but if you want to show up in person, just come. 1:30. The dates are out on the calendar on our website. The first date is in April. Generally, it's the third Sunday. But if the third Sunday is Easter or Father's Day, then it's going to be a different time. But you come, you won't be sorry. And if you didn't take the written test, or if you want to take the written test, certified written test, come that day too, because probably about 2:30, about after the hands-on part is done, we will be offering the written test. Well, thank you very much for your questions and your attention. I hope you enjoyed the pictures. And I see Jim Blau over here waiting to start the meeting.